1, 2, 3, and... Don't worry about the earth, it'll survive long after humans cease to be alive. Pollution will recede, the sun will fill the need, and vanquished life will steadily revive. The human race will all be dead and gone, but planet Earth will orbit on and on. Those endless days and nights will wear away the sights of all the promise humankind had shown. Our God is a big fat dollar bill, yes it is, and we don't ever seem to get our fill. So get out of our way, we could care less what you say. We ain't changing and we never will. Like lemmings who run headlong to the sea, like fools who cannot learn from history. Our egos make us break, exploit until we take the very earth that supports you and me. As long as I can make another buck, then I don't really give a flying duck. We'll cut the forest down, we'll bulldoze up the ground, we'll turn our nest into an oozing muck. Our God is a big fat dollar bill, and we don't ever seem to get our fill. So get out of our way, we could care less what you say. We ain't changing and we never will. You lefties with your warnings oh so dire, your anti-business ravings never tire. Blasphemy! Don't you know you're on the moon and that Christ is coming soon to toast your godless asses in the fire? Ecology don't mean one thing to me, no spotted owl or some redwood tree. So get out of our path or you will feel the wrath of dollar-loving patriots and corporate compatriots and Bible-thumping right-wing nuts like me. Our God is a big fat dollar bill, ooh, yes it is, and we won't ever get our fill. So get out of our way, we could care less what you say. We ain't changing and we never will. Hallelujah.
Well, that's a cheery one. Welcome to A Question of Meaning with Arthur and Katie.
Howdy, howdy.
And that was a song Arthur wrote for Earth Day a few years ago, and kind of sums up maybe our attitude towards American-style capitalism.
God and commerce.
That's right. And so we thought we'd tackle the subject of politics today.
Yoicks.
Yeah, as we promised.
Next week, sex.
That's right. We were going to go for some of these, the things you're never supposed to bring up at polite conversation, around the dinner table. And, but, we thought politics, obviously, I think anyone that's listened to us or maybe even looks at us could imagine that we are liberals. And we really have no interest in going over, kind of the present day stuff. I mean, that's what we're going to attempt to avoid and really stay more with political philosophy.
What did the E.T. and The Day the Earth Stood Still say? That I'm not interested in getting involved in your petty squabbles.
That's right. People are like, petty squabbles? This is the Cold War you're talking about. These are, weighty issues.
Are we still having the Cold War? I thought this was the war on terror.
No. This was back then.
Oh, back then. Oh, that's right. When the Soviet communist.
I mean, that's what people thought.
Threat.
That was weighty issues. People, it was, I'm sure, very shocking.
It's always
to people.
weighty. Whatever time you're in, it's weighty.
That's right.
Consternation in a clam colony, overwrought oyster bed. Whee!
So, because we're looking at questions of meaning, and that really means for us, bringing consciousness into politics. I would imagine, how do conscious people approach politics? And I guess I would say that would be more our approach here.
Or what role does consciousness play in politics? And what is politics,
Well, that's always a good starting point, yes.
The closest quote I've heard is basically politics is arranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
No, that's your quote.
That's not that's the well-known quote. It's akin to that, but mine is politics is the nations of the world are basically individual insane asylums. And in insane asylums like the United States, the inmates elect representatives to represent their interest. And they basically, who they elect, of course, are other inmates. I mean, other, insane people. And so it's basically nuts leading nuts. And some other countries, like North Korea, one nut wrests control over the other nuts or inherits it like Dear Leader did from his daddy. And they exercise brutal control over their inmates. The inmates have no vote.
Okay, well, I would say that
Here we have one nut, one vote system in our country.
That definition, actually, that wasn't a definition, that was more a description.
Ah.
And that, because I would say a definition would be more that politics is our relationship with one another in and how we organize ourselves into a society. And that the form of that organization is reflective of the consciousness level of any given society.
Couldn't say it better myself.
So, I've heard it said that we get exactly the government we deserve. Well, you could say that our present government accurately reflects the level of consciousness of our country at this time.
Oh my God.
That's right. So you don't like the bums in Washington? Well, guess what? They reflect us.
Guess who put them there?
That's right. And they're the best we can do, unfortunately.
You mean so earlier generations, actually, Abraham Lincoln reflected their values and their
Yeah.
And
Wow. So are we
Franklin
devolving?
D. Roosevelt.
We're devolving, in other words.
Oh my God.
But, from my perspective, because I was very political when I was a teenager. I was, I read the newspaper when I was in my, like 11 and 12. And I really considered, I for a long time thought I probably would be in politics. But then as I started really investigating consciousness and getting more, that's what my life was about, I started, my attitude towards politics changed. And it's like, if you want to improve the political structure of your country, the only way really to achieve it is through increasing the level of consciousness. And so I feel like what I'm doing with my life in terms of trying to get more conscious is also trying to improve the political. I'm still at that political thinking that I had when I was a child. I've just gone at how to improve the political life of this country in a different way. It's certainly not by, going out and advocating for one of our two political parties. I don't ever see that anymore as the real work that needs to be done.
Yeah, because I'm starting to think about what is the difference between the time of Lincoln and certainly I wouldn't say overall consciousness was any higher, but there were some factors that weren't present then, including FDR. Factors like the factor that Dwight Eisenhower, a solid Republican, warned us about in his farewell speech, the rise of the military-industrial complex. There's some writing, I wish I could quote it, was like 3,000 years ago. They said that any government's primary function, 3,000 years ago, this was written.
Hammurabi.
All right.
The Code of Hammurabi.
It was, unless, correct me since you know the name of it, it was the government's primary function should be protecting the weak from the powerful.
Right.
And the powerful have gotten really more sophisticated, much smarter over time. The rich have learned how to instill fear, or keep a perpetual low boil of fear among the population so we don't have any problem spending $1,000 billion at least a year on the Defense Department, to keep us safe from those terrorists and communists and, whatever other,
Evil
the threat du jour, we're having to deal with. And the suckers, we go for it because, consciousness implies really being informed about what the hell is going on in your capital and in your elected representatives, what they're really doing. And I'll bet you, God, you read the statistics about how little we know in this country.
Right.
And, you think going and, pulling a lever once every 4 years and you're an active citizen, you're really a good, and pay your taxes. A lot more is required than that, especially when liberty, you really care about liberty? You teabaggers out there, man, you want to be really pissed off about something? Try the fact that you're a slave to the rich. That's what the real problem is, whether you know it or not. It has nothing to do with Democrat or Republican. It's called the best government money can buy, to paraphrase Will Rogers, who I think said that back in the 40s. Best Congress money can buy. It's overt, codified, legal corruption flourishing in your country, where the rich, thanks Clinton for letting the billionaires buy more TV and radio stations to instill right-wing propaganda in your ears and on your eyes. What did Ted Turner say? Almost 90% of everything you read, see, and hear is owned by basically 5 corporations. The rise of giant companies that control, and they're smart enough to know. Remember the old, when public relations was kind of a new concept back in the 60s? And now they got it down, man. They know how to feed you one-sided arguments, acting like they're on side, like they're on your side, like they give a rat's rear end about who you are and what you've got. They couldn't care less, Okay, so this is the threat to the noble principle of democracy. Sounds great. Sounds wonderful. Beautiful idea. The power is vested in the people. But if the people get trifling and lazy and go to sleep in front of their boob tubes, which is probably one of the greatest threats to civilization ever invented.
I think about it this way, and we discussed this a little bit. There's a quote that I love by William F. Buckley. Not that, and I don't love it because I agree with him. I love it because I think it really exposes a fundamental difference between conservatism and liberalism. And I can't quote it exactly, but I'll paraphrase it, which is that from what conservatives believe is that everything that was good happened in the past, and that our job is to hold on to that, and then there is nothing new for us in the future.
Good God.
And to me, I can't imagine having that worldview. To me, that is just anti-evolutionary, just at the basis of it.
Most of them don't believe in evolution, so that's no problem.
Right.
It
certainly fits in with it. But for me, and I think this is the basics of liberalism, is that societies evolve like everything else in the universe evolves, and that we and as I said earlier, that the politics is a reflection of the level of consciousness of a society. That overall level of consciousness of society has been increasing over human history, and our politics changes as a result, and that we are moving towards a more equal, a more just society, and that you can, if you tell the history of humanity through that, we all started off as slaves pretty much.
That's right.
To one or two really powerful men. And, things have changed quite dramatically.
A few queens of Egypt.
A few queens. That's right. That's right. Thank you. And then if you just take our country in particular, if you look at the Constitution, it wasn't really democratic. The only people that could vote were white men who had property. That was it.
I actually heard this once that an expert on the Constitution said that they said if you owned a mule, you could vote. And the interviewer said, well, what if the mule died? You lost your vote.
So next time somebody is defending the Constitution and the strict constructionists, and we must stick to the principles of the Constitution as it was written by the founders, ask them that question. Oh, well, so are you really in favor of taking away the vote from women, taking away the
women
vote
had
from
no vote,
black
the
people?
Framers,
That's right.
They
That's
didn't
what
get
I'm
the
saying.
vote until last century.
1919.
Right.
It's less than 100 years since women could vote. And black people, basically they couldn't vote in a good part of this country until the 50s. So
see, both those things, when they let them have the vote, that's when the problem
That's
started.
right.
That's what's
Well,
wrong with the
yes,
country. We need to go back to the
That's exactly right.
dark ages.
So
Just like
you can
Islamic
see,
fundamentalists.
and I can give you lots of different examples. The Bill of Rights, the Constitution as it was written by the founders would not have been accepted by the states without, they had to amend the Constitution with 10 amendments, which we now know as the Bill of Rights, before it could even have been adopted. So the founders really weren't that, all-seeing.
They were slave owners, some of them, et cetera, et cetera.
They didn't really trust the people, even the few people they gave the vote, they didn't really trust, and that's why the Senate was not popularly elected. They withheld that because to the state legislature, it's like
the House of Lords.
Trust me. The founders didn't think much of the average person, okay?
They didn't come down from the mountaintop with gold tablets.
So the history of our country over the last 230 whatever years has been an increase in democracy, an increase in the ability of the average person to participate in to be considered a citizen. And I think that will just keep increasing in that. And that's what a liberal is in favor of. That's what a liberal is in favor of, increasing democracy. As far as I can tell, a conservative wants to keep it back the way it was, where some were privileged and some, the gods and clods, as famously said in South Park.
It's the natural order of things.
That's right.
I would say that my take on conservatism is this, that the conservative wants things to remain as they are. And there are three categories, what I call R words that perfectly describe that mindset. The first is rich. Now,
Right.
Anybody can understand how a rich person likes things just fine the way they are. They love things like trickle-down economics. You know what that is? Imagine a big tower with a sea of common people, the clods, dying of thirst underneath the tower. And on the top of the tower, there are the elite, the 1%, who own 90% of the country. And they're up there with an incredible bounty of bottled water, fresh water they can drink all they want just till they're satiated. As a matter of fact, they're so satiated that at times they have to relieve themselves, so they go over to the edge and do it over the side under the heads of the low-lifes below. And that's trickle-down economics. Okay, so that's one, the rich. The second are the rustics. I grew up in Dixieland, and God, don't y'all ever get embarrassed at being backward? I mean, really? Are we ever going to, join the 21st century down here? Are we going to be trash forever? Christ almighty. The rustic, the credulous, the rubes, the country bumpkins, the people that really, frankly, aren't that informed. Mm-hmm. They're really not up to speed, and they hold in contempt intelligence. They're suspicious of change. They resist it doggedly. Have to be drugged by the scruff of their neck into the space age. So there's that group. So you got the rich and the rustic, and the other, unfortunately, are the religious. The more fundamentalist variety, who are legion, and they also resist change and take preposterous positions like anti-global warming. Any change in morality is anathema, especially when it has to do with sex. So this is the conservative mindset, and the conservative mindset then is resistant to change. Here's my argument for that. In the physical universe, I would like any reader to call in or write me of any physical, observable object in the universe that is not doing one of two things. It's either growing and expanding, or it's contracting into death. It's either growing or it's declining. Growth or decline. There is no static place ever that you can discover. In a plant's growth cycle, nobody can pinpoint that apex in which the plant starts going into decline. I always thought the country was going to come down, the empire of America was going to fall, but I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime. But after 8 years of an entire intellectual mediocrity and stooge in the White House named George W. Bush, I said I wasn't going to do this. I wasn't going to name names. So, we are just starting to get the bill. Your economy is collapsing because you have listened to clowns like Ronald Reagan who you want to get big government off your back? You see what's happening to the world economy? You see what's happening to your country? You see the unemployment rate that really is at least 15%? You know why that is? Because big government got off the backs of the banks. That's what it looks like when you get big government. You need big government. Like you need, if you lived in a high crime area, like you need a 12-gauge pump shotgun next to your bed. You need somebody looking out for your interest. That's what the federal government is supposed to do. But you've allowed this legalized corruption to go up there. The fat cats go up there on K Street and buy these creeps, buy their vote, get their agenda passed. You don't have a prayer. You're not a participating member of a democracy. You're a slave.
So I think you were on this philosophical argument about how nothing can change in the universe, and you kind of got sidetracked.
Well, that's true. Everything is either growing or dying, and conservatives want to keep things the same. There's no such thing as same. There's no such thing as staying the same through time in the observable physical universe. The only thing that stays exactly the same is BS. Because it's not subject to the interactional forces of change, just pure nonsense like, Jesus is coming next week. That kind of garbage can, last for thousands of years unchanged. Wild,
Well, one of the things that's really...
Sorry, you can tell I feel somewhat passionately on this subject. I'm just watching the United States go down the tubes, while the populace is in American Idol.
Well, and one of the things is that we totally underestimate our power in the world and in our government. Who said that the government should be afraid of its citizens? And they really are. That was something wonderful in Michael Moore's movie Capitalism: A Love Story, where he showed the Citigroup's memo to their rich investors about the plutonomy, which you can. I've looked up online. You can actually go to a site and read the memo exactly as it appeared, and they're expressing optimism about how basically the world in most of the Western countries are setting it up so that there's a kind of a separate economy for the wealthy, and that's really in some that already certain countries like the United States there already is, and there's one threat that they could really conceive of, and that was that democracy existed. Now imagine
the people wake up
saying that this is a threat, that democracy is a threat to your order of things. And that's what they said, because the one person, one vote is a problem that we have to deal with. And because if the people ever did wake up, they could throw this system over. But, that's why they buy the news stations. That's why they have such effective control of the media.
Propaganda is everything.
Because they don't want us to realize, they don't want us to realize our power. And they want to keep us dull and distracted, which...
divided.
Divided, yeah. Yes.
That's right.
That's right.
There's
so much to say.
There's so much to say. It's just so maddening. It's like watching people plugged into the Matrix. You don't get it, I mean... When a revolution happens in a country, the first thing they do is take over the TV and radio stations and the newspapers. They want to control the message.
Right.
Because you believe what you see. As seen on TV, as heard by Rush Limbaugh. It must be right. Rush said it, simple, blaring, dumbass positions, of just give me one A-bomb, I'll tell you what to do with them. Some radio personality telling you how to think. And all this garbage about the liberal media, that may have been true in the 60s, babies, but it ain't been true for a long time. There's something like 3,000 hours of right-wing radio on the airwaves in this country every week, and a few hundred max of anything like liberal.
Well, plus if you're really a progressive like I am, and you watch a program that has a representative conservative and a representative liberal, that liberal, so-called liberal, is not truly liberal.
Yeah.
They are very centrist and, almost right-wing from my point of view. I rarely hear a true progressive represented on television.
You hear Dennis Kucinich very much.
That's right.
You'll hear a whole lot of Colmes, this golem creature they parade out as repulsive and a weakling, a spineless, cowardly weakling. That's supposed to represent progressive. Yeah, it's really fixed because the rich like it the way it is. They don't want to change. They love having a yacht, a personal yacht, as long as a football field. It's called a mega yacht. They're over 300 feet long. They love stuff like that, jet setting around, lying in the sun, getting oiled by, well, never mind. Let's not carry this too far. Sounds good, right? Yeah, it is good to the 1% that own everything, but to the legions of slaves who are taught patriotism and kept in a state of fear and, are getting fired up by demagogues on the air against the gay marriage and, I can remember integration babies, I'm old enough, the civil rights movement, the horrendous resistance against that. The resistance against the Vietnam War. If you were against the Vietnam War, you were a traitor and a commie lover, and you know what kind of lover you were in the civil rights movement. And it's constant. I remember I'm old enough to remember when, who was that demagogue who was real popular back then before Rush Limbaugh? Paul Harvey. Oh, he was an ugly one. Yeah, he was, he wasn't the kind of senile old advertising, product pusher that he became. He was definitely dirty hippies are ruining the country, blah, 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 blah.
Well, I think maybe we should do a song.
Okay. You mentioned, would you want to do Plato's Cave?
Okay, that's interesting.
Speaking of plutocracy, he got kind of a bad rap for that, maybe.
Plutocracy.
No, Pluto. I got it. Yeah,
Pluto.
I got it.
Plato.
Platonics. I got Europe and Eureka mixed up.
Well, Plato, he wrote a book, or maybe we call it a book. I don't know if he would really call it then, The Republic, and in which he saw having a philosopher king. And Arthur made this interesting observation when we were talking about what songs to do, that lawyers, in our culture, lawyers are maybe the most despised group of all. And yet our government is filled with lawyers. I had never thought of that. It's like we hate lawyers, but then we elect them to write our laws, but to represent us in our government. And I guess I always thought, well, yeah, the reason we have so many lawyers in government is because that's their job, is to write laws. So, since if they're lawyers, that means they're good at it. But, maybe what we should have is lawyers who are employed to make sure that that the laws are written properly. But the people who are actually representing us are, people like us.
Which would be an interesting discussion of why they're so despised, since law seems to me it should be, like philosophy, an effort to ferret out the truth. But so often it's how to avoid the truth, how to find loopholes, how to beat the system and game it, and get around it. But the inherent corruption, basically, and a bunch of commoners running the show was very much anathema to Plato. He believed strongly in a class of people who went through this incredible 20 or 30 year training to prepare for the awesome job of leading. Mm-hmm. And you had to, every step of the way, you were reviewed and checked, and your intentions were pure. You couldn't make any money. Just for starters, how's that? There's no platinum parachute when you get out of the Congress of the United States and go work for the damn defense contractor that bribed you to vote their way. Welcome, faithful servant, into the bounty of thy Lord. It's beyond belief. It really is. We have a rotten system. It was founded on noble principles, and the pigs have taken over. Giant corporate piggery that has learned to control everything. And that's why I say we're slaves. And unless we wake up, we're going to really, you're going to have literal slavery. Actually, things are going to get so bad that we're going to wind up with the equivalent of Rush Limbaugh as president, or Glenn Beck, one of those other clowns, who's going to make the trains run on time and you will obey orders. And what little freedom you have is going to be taken away. Anyway, that's what I think. That's why we're on the show, so we can say what we think.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Okay, Plato's cave. Anybody knows the allegory of the cave? Plato was talking about a reality and how we perceive reality. He describes a situation. You want to say it?
No,
okay. But, where a group of prisoners have been chained since birth, early childhood. And at the very end of a cave, right all the way in at the deepest point, they're chained. They're sitting side by side, and they're chained in such a way they can't even turn to the right or left and look at each other. What they can look at is a wall right in front of them, just a big, flat wall, and they see their shadows projected on that wall. That the shadows are cast by a fire that's kept burning all the time back up the passageway. They can't see it. They don't see the cause of the light. They don't know that they're looking at shadows, but this is their reality. This is all they see. And they talk about it, and they have theories about it, and they develop philosophies about it, and opinions about it, and religions about it. And this goes on. And one day, a prisoner finally, somehow, miraculously, escapes the chains, gets back up the tunnel, sees the fire, and sees the fire keepers, manages to avoid detection. The people who keep the fire going and that feed the prisoners throughout their lives, take care of them. Gets all the way past that, all the way out to the mouth of the cave, looks out and sees the seasons changing, sees this huge world out there. And he's just blown away. And he turns around just because he has to, and he goes back to the prisoners and tries to tell them what he's found and share the miraculous discovery with them. And they're all thrashing in their chains. And if they could get loose, they'd kill him because he so threatens their established beliefs in reality. So, nice little metaphor for people who are enjoying their time in the Matrix and mistake it for what's real. 1, 2, 3. In Plato's cave, a prisoner dreams of a place he knows is true. High above this captive darkness that was once all that he knew. In Plato's cave, a chance to escape sent him wandering from that wall that he'd studied for a lifetime, that he'd never learned at all. In Plato's cave, everyone was chained with their faces to the stone, and their shadows were reality, not just ghosts the light had thrown. In Plato's cave, all the others said that a life in shadowed chain was the most that one could hope for. There was nothing else to gain if man had met God to fly. So to Plato's cave, he escaped his chains and he stumbled to the light. And he saw the wherefore, saw the light, and he saw the prisoner's plight. And to Plato's cave he returned to tell of the wonders of above. But there his words of hope received more fear and hate than love. In Plato's cave, maybe life ain't much, but it's all we've ever known. We're secure in this reality, so won't you please leave us alone? Yeah, in Plato's cave, maybe life ain't much, but it's all we've ever known. We're secure in this reality, so won't you please leave us alone? In Plato's cave, a prisoner dreams of a place he knows is true. High above the shadow darkness There was once all that he knew.
It's like, I really didn't think that we'd find anything political in that song. I thought it was more about philosophy about, but it really, there it is again, that kind of conservative liberal split between, we're secure the way it is, leave it alone, and the attempt to change is always resisted by the status quo, and and you're called all sorts of names.
Best medical system in the world.
That's
Best healthcare system in the world. God, 30 years ago, I got something in my eye in Australia and went to an ear, nose, and throat hospital, got it removed and paid, it was $1. It was for some reason you had to pay $1. It's best care,
Well, the more I've learned about politics, or the older I've gotten, the more I've realized the centrality of economics. And I've really been reading a lot in economics to try and understand better, what's going on. And I've read a lot of Paul Krugman and Joseph Stiglitz and other authors. And, that I think one thing that we've people today, particularly young people today who've never lived, who were born post-Reagan, have no concept of what has happened to our country. And Krugman and Stiglitz talk a lot about how after the New Deal era and after the Great Depression, that the incredible levelizing effect of all those New Deal reforms were on economic inequality, that what had been a very unequal society in the 20s was over decades brought to a much more level playing field, and it also brought about widespread prosperity, and the middle class there was like a golden era that when in our youth when working class people had a decent life in this country.
That's right.
And it's with the election of Ronald Reagan, all of that was dismantled, and it's been continuing for 30 years now, to the point where the average person's wages are declining, while the wealthy are just becoming vastly more wealthy, and income inequality is rapidly increasing in this country, while social programs are being demolished, and we're even, and there's all sorts of tricks for how the conservatives play the game so they can convince people that the social programs are too expensive and will, cause the deficit disorder. I don't even want to get into all that right now. But it's gone on so long folks. Now, these 30 years that we've forgotten what we've lost. And it's, and that's what, I'm so disappointed with the current regime in Washington, is that they have not really taken this most important task on, which is educating the American people what we've lost, what the average person has lost, and what we could have if we demanded it.
Wake up requires waking up first. We can demand it when we wake up.
And, like things like, keep government out of my Social Security or out of my Medicare. I mean, that is a level of ignorance that's so mind-blowing. Mm-hmm. But where's the effort to really be out there and correcting, that level of ignorance? Mm-hmm. I don't see it.
FDR, that was the symbol of democratic populism. I mean, this is for the people.
Right.
It was also in the riches. They never see it until the guillotine, blade snaps their head off. They never see it. They never see it coming. All they can do is just take and take and take. Insatiable greed.
Right. And the fall of the Soviet Union was just a great present to what they call market fundamentalists, or the Chicago School of Economics, that are the ones that preach this really harsh American form of capitalism, which is winner takes all, and the rest of us are losers, and no social programs at all. And at that time in the early 90s, the triumphalism of the American way, the end of history. I mean, imagine saying the end of history. That just amazed me that anybody could have that preposterous idea that history was over. We'd accomplished the end point of political evolution. There was nothing better that could ever be achieved. I mean, okay, hubris at its just amazing level. But at that time, because the Soviet Union, was communist, and that just proved that the ideas of Marx and socialism were completely erroneous and injurious to people and should just not even be studied anymore. And I'm sure there was a lot of Marxist academicians around the country that struggled to keep, teaching the courses because it was so. I mean, you use Marx. You couldn't even use the word Marx without being laughed at. And I'm starting to. I really think that Marx is going to have the last laugh here. That socialism is where we're headed. American-style capitalism is a way. We're going to look back on this as a period of time that human beings had to endure and pass through to get to a much more equitable.
So we should thank Ronnie Reagan for starting us on the decline. It was always there. The seeds were there.
Right.
After World War II, the military-industrial complex said, "Hey,
right,
hey,
right,
we're making money hand over fist. I mean, why should we disarm?
Right.
We need to." We need to keep rolling. All the stuff about when a war is over, you beat your swords into plowshares. Forget that. That's
right.
So old thinking.
That's right. So pre-World War II.
Yeah, that's right.
So pre-Good War, I should say.
Yeah, so let's immediately segue into a Cold War where we can, develop doomsday armaments and just make the military bigger and bigger and bigger and just glom the cash, Masters of war. For profit. They couldn't care less about anybody blown away in Iraq or Afghanistan. They just want the cash.
Right.
They're machines. They're like horrendous machines feeding on greed.
I would say until we get money out of elections, we're nothing's going to change. I mean, for me, that's the only real political issue that I know of is to make all elections publicly financed. I mean, from the down to dog catcher, I think you'd have to.
And to put these corporations on a leash, an iron leash, and I guess we're the financial industry as well. You see how reticent and how hard it is to get them to pass some legislation because they're all on the take. They're a bunch of whores.
That's right.
I mean, the natural, this is one of my favorites, this is one of my sayings, that as the inevitable goal of survival is immortality. It can't be anything else. You want to live forever. So the inevitable goal of capitalism is monopoly. They want to own everything. And if they're not on a leash, if they're not regulated, they're going to do that. They're going to raise your insurance, your health insurance, however much they want. If you don't like it, too bad. North Carolina, the Blue Cross is a monopoly. There's no competition. What are you going to do? You're going to pay or lose your insurance. They can cancel your policies. Even if you get sick, they can cancel you. They love it. They love unregulated capitalism, giving business its head, letting the pig pen, the hog pen open and letting them run wild. And, that's the American spirit. Let them, the free enterprise, just in all its glory. And look at what they've done. They almost brought the whole world economy down around our heads. This country almost went into a Great Depression again. Stop watching don't watch. That was a Freudian. Watch URTV. Stop watching American Idol and that other brain-rotting pablum they pump out on you. Wake up.
Well, the joke is that the financial industry, is in the forefront of declaring that government should not regulate business, and yet every time they have a crisis, which is really often, if you look back at the last 25 years, there have been multiple crises, financial crises, that have required, guess what? Government intervention. Mm-hmm. So they say, keep government out of our business until we fall apart,
Until
which
we
is
get
about
there.
every few
Yeah,
years.
that's
And
right.
then government come in and bail us out. But then as soon as we're back on our feet, get out of our business. And, and it's like, when are we going to wake up?
And let us do some other legal Ponzi scheme. And when it crashes and all these people get burned, I mean, people who've lost their life savings, man, I'd take that pump action shotgun, clean it, and get a pocket full of shells and go up there and
Well, maybe this will
why
be.
not up the revolution? Let's do it. Let's get a guillotine built on the damn Washington Mall
Well,
and get
maybe this-
I'll give you high definition programming.
Well, this will maybe be an introduction to another
Well, that's
song.
like fomenting rebellion, isn't it? I mean, I could be jailed for this. You know?
Yeah. Well,
Bring it down. Bring it on. Up the
I
people.
thought that was American to foment rebellion, didn't it? Anyway,
the blood
so,
of liberty
that's
is,
right, watered by
is watered by the
blood of
tree of liberty is watered by the
blood.
by the
Of
blood
rebellion.
of tyrants, of
Yeah, yeah.
patriots.
Well-
Watered by the blood of patriots. Something like that.
Whatever.
Who cares?
So no, what I was going to say was we were talking about the financial industry, and I was going to lead this into that song you have open there. A favorite book of mine is Paul Kennedy's The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers, because it talks about the last 500 years of your Western history. As usual, most histories, is like the only thing that exists, is Russia and West till you get to America, and then it stops. But anyway, we won't go into that. But and he looks at the rise and fall of all the great powers that existed, and they all have common themes to them, and one of their themes is that they overextend themselves in their empires, which it's very easy to see how the United States has done that. And another thing that they all do is the financial sector gets huge, and this is one of the very last signs before the decline becomes obvious. And what that means is the country stops producing things. They stop making anything of value. All they do is manipulate paper to create false wealth. And that's what, in my mind, that's what Wall Street is it's that's what's wrong with what's the financial industry, and I don't know the exact statistics, but it's gone from it's up to like 17% of the GDP is now the financial industry, whereas manufacturing is shrunk down to like 10%. We don't make, and so anyway, so that, that's what's, if you just say on the face of it, what's wrong with the financial industry? Well, it's not productive. It's extracting from society. It's not producing anything. I mean, yes, there are some things that the financial industry does that are of value, but overall, the trading, the high-speed computers that allow Goldman Sachs to make trades in a millisecond before anybody else can do those trades, and they make millions of dollars every day based on those millisecond faster trades. What value is being created for society in that? Absolutely none. So these are the signs that I point to say, that America is definitely on the decline, as it should. I mean, all organic things go up and down. Countries rise and fall.
Yeah, but this is America.
But what we're seeing, and I think, is that we're seeing it go down faster than maybe it needs to go down.
For sure.
And that there is some really wonderful things about America that that we have brought to the world conversation, and we could do things better, and that's what this song is about.
Yeah, when you talk about the upper 10%, over 90% of everything,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, game over. You call that a democracy? I call it a plutocracy with knobs on.
Yeah, that's what we really have
It's not
here.
fair. And that stuff about rags to riches, yeah, your chances of winning the lottery and being struck 3 times in the same place by lightning are probably better.
Yeah, actually, Kevin Phillips, in his book Wealth and Democracy, did some research on that, and the amount of movement across classes is a lot less than than the myth. Yeah, there are, of course, the famous examples like our current president, but they're the exceptions. So,
What key do we do this?
American option, A7.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, and... This house is sick, maybe rotten to the core, but we better think before we pull it down. It's right and it's fitting to be seeking something more, but we better take another damn good look around. This house is frail, but it's shelter from the cold, and we better know how cold it is outside. There are prisons up the street full of fools. They sold the idea brotherhood was free inside. Don't tear down the walls, and just because they're dirty, don't put out the fire. Ooh, just because it's burned you, don't dig up the lawn. And just because it's weedy, we know what to do. I said we know what to do. This house is sick and we're waking up in fear. Only yesterday we thought it was the best. But we can't treat the sickness till we know that it's there. And it's getting so we can't find, any rest. Well, this house was built to survive any decay, but the rotten hearts inside. It is we alone who have made it this way, but we're always acting like it's someone else who lied. Don't tear down the walls, ooh, just because they're dirty. Don't put out the fire just because it's burned you. Don't dig up the lawn, no, just because it's weedy. We know what to do. I say we know what to do. Well, this house is ours, and our neighbors point and say that the dream it's built on is really almost gone. But they'd better stop their pointing and begin to pray that we can find the key to what is wrong. Well, this house is frail and to some it's really dead, but the foundation is living and it's strong. Oh, there are no easy answers in the times ahead, but we're free to right, not justify more wrongs. Don't turn out the light, ooh, no, and don't put out the fire, ooh, no, and don't dig up the lawn. We know what to do. I say we know what to do. Don't tear down the walls just because they're dirty. And don't put out the fire just because it's burned you. And don't dig up the lawn, whoa, just because it's weedy. We know what to do. I said we know what to do. We know what to do. Yay, we know what to do. The song's called The American Option to the Demolition Blues.
But it certainly has an optimistic message that we know what to do.
Well, the democratic principles are beautiful. Mm-hmm. They're noble. They're wonderful. We just gotten taken over by a bunch of pigs while we were sleeping. We need to wake the hell up and kick their ass back in the barnyard where they belong. Well regulated. Here's your trough, and this is how much swill you get.
That's right.
Now shut up and behave, or we'll haul you off to the knackers. I still think the guillotine on the mall is a good idea.
Yep. Yeah, but I think certainly, it's like we've gotten so cowed, as workers here in this country, that the globalization and the jobs all moving overseas.
The demise of the unions.
Yeah, we're afraid that if we protest, it's going to get even worse. We don't recognize our power. March issue of Harper's Magazine was an article about the German system of worker participation in corporate governance, which is quite amazing. And just for one thing, any corporation, the board of directors, 50% are workers from within the plant that are elected by the workers
Socialism,
of the
oh,
corporation
Lord.
to be on the board of directors. I mean, so things like outsourcing jobs doesn't happen in Germany it's much harder to do because the board of directors says,
Golly, imagine that, taking care of your own goddamn people. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
What a trip, you know?
Yeah.
What a radical socialism, communist idea, you know?
That's right.
God, we are slaves, folks.
Yeah.
We are slaves.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of doing, instead of, swimming.
Yeah.
Let's just do that because, I mean, we could talk some more.
Okay.
But that kind of says maybe
Yeah, I'll tell you where I'm at with it. And that was, I wrote this song in a period of supreme, wonderful decadence, total self-indulgence that I was privileged to enjoy for all too few years. Actually, it was just a few. It would have killed me.
most people.
But it kind of sums up my life, man. When I was about 15 years old, I started getting the idea that, I have tried so hard and so long to fit in with them, the striding, the jocks and the cheerleaders and the in crowd. But when I was about 16, it finally started dawning on me, these people, it's basically bird brains that did everything because everybody else did it. They didn't really have anything else going at all other than acting and being alike, kind of being this apotheosis of whatever the tribal, if you put a dinner plate in your lower lip, if that was what was really in, it's just a form of that.
So,
okay.
So there's benefits to questioning.
Absolutely. That's what I would say. The message here about politics is question your government.
That's right.
And don't be stupid about it. Inform yourself. Don't listen to clowns on the radio like Beck and Limbaugh, or Olbermann or Maddow. I think they're clowns too.
They are clowns.
They're not representative of progressives. You want to see a progressive? Read A Tale of Two Cities. Read about the Defarges.
Okay.
I'll show you a progressive. Oh, wait.
Yeah, I know.
There's something to be said for swimming with the sharks and betting that the bites are no worse than the barks. There's something to be said for swimming with the sharks and betting that the bites are no worse than the barks. They told me sex was dirty, except unto a wife. They told me I was jerking off the best years of my life, but somehow I saw different, and guilt was worth the price. To all alone or with a friend escape to paradise. Woo! Something to be said for swimming with the sharks and betting that the bites are no worse than the barks. There's something to be said for swimming with the sharks and betting that the bites are no worse than the barks. They told me about Jesus and how he turned his cheek and how good Christians must forgive and practice what they speak. But somehow I saw different, saw contradictions peak. So kindly pray downwind because I just can't take the reek. There's something to be said for swimming with the sharks and betting that the bites are no worse than the barks. Something to be said for swimming with the sharks and betting that the bites are no worse than the barks. They told me that my duty was kill or else be killed, defend their freaking lifestyle, and me the one who's billed. Well, somehow I saw different. I'd die to keep you free. Well, better dead than red yourself. You're dead for all I see. There's something to be said for swimming with the sharks and betting that the bites are no worse than the barks. There's something to be said for swimming with the sharks and betting that the bites are no worse than the barks. They told me drugs would kill me and turn my mind to mush and kill precious ambition, that pursuit of royal flush. Well, somehow I saw different, and maybe I will die. But visions even stolen beat a safe but sleeping sty. There's something to be said. Join us next week for another
Question of meaning.
Yeah. There's something to be said for swimming with the sharks and betting that the bites are no worse than the barks. There's something to be said for swimming with the sharks and betting that the bites are no worse than the barks. Something Whoa, something, something, oh, something, something to be said.